everyone, I am Vibha Chauhan and welcome to Chauhan classes from the Clear. So today I will explain class 9th history chapter 3 and our chapter is Nazism and the rise of Hitler. Nazism and the rise of Hitler. So in this chapter we are going to discuss about Nazism and the rise of Hitler, about Hitler, how he rose into the power. So you know that in the first chapter we had discussed about the French Revolution, about the France, and in the next chapter we had discussed about the Russian Revolution, about the Russia country, and in this chapter we are going to discuss about Germany. You know that many changes were brought up by the First World War and Second World War in Germany. So what were those changes and why were they brought up? How were they brought up? We will discuss all these things in detail in this chapter. So we will also discuss about Hitler in this chapter. Now many of you might have heard this name. You know that he was a brutal dictator who had killed many people. His Nazi party had killed many people. We will also discuss about Nazism. Nazism was not just a thing, was not just a party, Nazi party. It was a structure of ideas brought up by Hitler, by Adolf Hitler, his full name. You know that Hitler had ambition of killing people, precisely Jews. He had ambition of turning Germany into a mighty power, into a superpower country. So he had many ambitions in him. So you could see that he was very brutal. And in this chapter we will discuss about him. So in May 1945, at the end of the Second World War, Hitler and his minister and his whole family had committed suicide in their Berlin bunker, and after that an international military tribunal was set up in Nuremberg, that is in Germany, to prosecute all the Nazi leaders for the crimes against peace, for the crimes against humanity, and for the war crimes. Now crimes against humanity because they had killed many people, and that also disturbed peace that was being maintained in the world. You know that Nazis had devised an unprecedented means of killing people, that was by gas chambers. That was a kind of unprecedented means of killing people. So many gas chambers had been set up just to kill people, like there were some in Auschwitz too, and there were many innocent civilians who were killed. These included 6 million Jews, 200,000 gypsies, 1 million Polish civilians, and 70,000 Germans who were considered mentally or physically disabled. And there were also some political opponents as well. So you could see that many people were killed by the Nazis, many innocent civilians as well. So you could say that all the dots of all these events could be traced after the First World War. So what were those acts? Why was it all after the First World War? What happened after the First World War? Let's discuss. So let's discuss our first topic, that is birth of the Weimar Republic. Birth of the Weimar Republic. You know that in the First World War, that was lasted during the time period of 1914 to 1918. Now there were two parties that were fighting this First World War. Now in the first, you could say that in the first party there were Germany and Austria together, and in second there were allies countries. You could say that there were England, France, and Russia. Now in the starting, what was happening, that Germany had thought that they had power, because during that time Germany also had power, and after that Germany had defeated Russia and France, parts of France and Russia, and that's also very badly they had defeated. But in 1917 United States also joined the Allies, and that turned the situation upwards. Now US, you could say that after that Germany and Austria were defeated very badly because of the US entry in the Allies. In 1917 it had joined, and in 1918 the First World War was ended. So you could say that Germany had a very bad defeat because of US entry in the Allies in the First World War. And after the emperor monarch had fallen down in Germany, and you could say that the emperor of Germany had abdicated, and that turned you could say an opportunity for the parliamentary parties, for the democratic parties, and that caused a national assembly met at Weimar, that is in Germany, and after that they made a constitution, a federal structure constitution, and after that Weimar Republic was formed. That national assembly that was met up in Weimar, and that's why it was called as Weimar Republic. And but you could say that they were not supported by their own people, by the citizens of Germans, because after the First World War there were many things, there were many casualties that Germany had to suffer. You could say that there was so much disgrace because of the Treaty of Versailles, for which people, the citizens of Germany, were holding the Weimar Republic, for which people, the citizens of Germans, were blaming the Weimar Republic, because after the First World War there was a treaty that was signed. There was a treaty that was signed between the Germany and the Allies, and that treaty was called as Treaty of Versailles, Peace Treaty of Versailles, and that was such a disgrace for the Germany. Because of that treaty, 13% of its territories, 26% of its industries, of Germany's industries, and all overseas colonies were were given to the Allies, were occupied by Allies, and also 1/10 of its population too, and you could say a very kind of developed industrial area, a rich resource area, Rhineland, was also occupied by the most of the 1920s by the Allies. So there was, you could say that was a disgrace for Germany, and people were blaming the Weimar Republic for it, because they thought that the disgrace at Versailles, that was signed treaty, was all because of Weimar Republic, and that's why people were thinking that the democratic ideas were too fragile, were not good, because they could not solve their own problems. So that was the birth of Weimar Republic, a republic, you could say that a national assembly that met in the Weimar part of Germany, but it had to suffer so much because of its own people. So now our subtopic is the effect of the war. The effect of the war. So you know that the First World War had an intense impact on the whole continent, both financially as well as psychologically, because there were many things that were changed after the First World War, like the European continent, that was the continent of creditors, had turned into the continent of debtors. People who were creditors had now turned into debtors, because the situations were very bad, were too bad after the First World War. Like for example, if we talk about the Germany, you know that Germany was being held for the cause of whole war, and that's why it had to pay 6 billion pounds as a compensation. And Weimar Republic, that was just formed after the First World War, was being blamed for the First World War defeat and for the disgrace at Versailles. And you know that many socialists, Democrats, Catholics who were supporting Weimar Republic were now being attacked by the people of Germany. Whenever they went to visit roads, whenever they were roaming on the roads of Germany, what was happening, that people were now attacking them, because they were called now as November criminals, that because the treaty was signed in November, and that's why they were called as November criminals. So it was very general, it had become very general that they had to be attacked by the people, because they were being held for the disgrace at Versailles. And you know that this First World War had an impact both psychologically and financially. Because Germany had fought that war, it had already very less treasury after the war, because 6 billion pounds, you know that was too much amount. And psychologically as well, it had an intense impact on the minds of people too. Now there was so much pressure in the minds of people, you could say, political opponents, political parties laid stress on the people for to be more aggressive, to the men to be more aggressive, to be more powerful and more masculine. So it had there were very bad effects of the First World War. As you know that if there is any war, there had to be bad effects as well, and that was what is happening in Europe, because in the starting of the war, what was happening, that Germany thought that it was very easy to win over the Allies, but after that they realized that it was their mistake, because it has an intense impact on Europe continent. After the war, Europe had lost so much resources because of this First World War. So you could say that the war has very bad impact on the people, on the minds of people, on the whole continent. Now our next subtopic is political radicalism and economic crisis. So political radicalism and economic crisis. So you know that in Russia before the First World War there was Bolshevik revolution, and in Germany there was a party, there was a league, more precisely that was Spartacist League, that was also doing things on the pattern of Bolshevik revolution that had been done in Russia, that we had discussed in the previous chapter. So the Spartacist League, it was a kind of Soviet of workers and sailors. Soviet, as you know, that council, it was in Russian language. So Soviet of workers and sailors, it was Spartacist League, and it was following the pattern of Bolshevik party. Now what Weimar Republic, Socialists, Democrats, Catholics were doing, that all the uprisings of Spartacist League were now being suppressed by the Weimar Republic with the help of army veterans. You know that army veterans, military veterans, who were called as free corps. So because of their help, with the help of those free corps, the uprising of Spartacist League was suppressed because of their help. And after that party, you know that the anarchist Spartacists formed their own party, that was Communist Party of Germany. And after that, all the communist and socialist Catholics, communists were on one side, and on the another hand they were socialist Catholics and Democrats. Now they had become irreconcilable enemy, and that's why when the Hitler rose in power, they could not be united. You know that strength lies in unity, but they were not united together. They had become already irreconcilable enemy, and that's why when the Hitler rose in power, they could not go against him. They could not raise their voice because they were not united. There was no strength in them. That's why they could not stop Hitler's power. And you know that during that time there was economic crisis. After 1923, Germany was suffering from an economic crisis because the First World War that Germany had fought that First World War with the help of loans, by taking loans from the other countries. And now the loans had turned so much, had became so much, because the loans slowly had become so much with the interests too, and that's why there was economic crisis in Germany. And after that it had to pay compensation as well. So because it had so much, it could not pay, you could say that all the loans that it had taken, it could not pay to France, Poland, that countries whom it had taken loans for its survival. And that's why in 1923 France had taken its most important, most developed industrial area, Ruhr, to claim their coal. You know that Ruhr in Germany is a very important, is a very developed industrial area, is most important industrial area in Germany. So that reason was taken away by the France after 1923, when there was economic crisis in Germany. And there was so much economic crisis, and after that there was hyperinflation in Germany. Hyperinflation, that means the prices of goods, items had raised with a huge difference, had raised you could say that had raised so much that it could not be unbelievably so much. Because why it was happening? Because you know that now Germany's mark's value, mark, that is the currency of Germany, was decreasing much and more, because in April of 1923 its value was 24,000. You know that $1 was equal to 24,000 marks, but by the December it had turned to trillions marks. So you could say that the difference was raising so much. The marks value of Germany was decreasing so much, and because of that there was hyperinflation in Germany. The prices of goods, the cost of goods and items had rose so much. There was kind of hyperinflation. Now when we say inflation, that means prices high, you know that the rise in prices. But when we say hyperinflation, that means the rise of prices unbelievably, that is unlimitedly, so much, a huge difference, a huge rise in the price of items. So that was hyperinflation, a kind of crisis in Germany. But it was, after a while, it was helped by the US. The US had seen that the condition of Germany was worsening, so it had helped with the Davis plans, which had helped Germany so much. Now we will look at our next subtopic, that is the years of depression. So the years of depression. So you know that between the years of 1924 to 1928 there was seen some stability in Germany. You know that, but yet this was built on sand, because the Germany investors, Germany business were based on the short-term loans by the Americans, and this was also withdrawn after the crashing of Wall Street Exchange, the biggest exchange stock in USA. So it was crashed down, and after that it hit the economic crisis in all over the Europe and in America too. You know that there was economic crisis, as US was a kind of superpower during that time and during now as well. You know that when its economic crisis was hit, there were many other countries that were hit by the economic crisis, because they all were based on the short-term loans that were given by the USA, by the Americans. But when America itself had some problems, has economic crisis, but then what about the other countries? You know that fearing the fall in prices, the Americans, what they did was they made so much efforts to sell their goods, and on a single day, on 24th October 1929, what happened that 13 million goods were sold, worth 13 million. So you could say that there was so much fear of economic crisis. And the country which was worst hit by the economic crisis was Germany. Now in Germany there was the entry of unemployment, or the workers were paid very less wages, very reduced wages, and there were many people who were unemployed. You know that in 1929 what happened, that there were more than 6 million people who were unemployed in Germany. And you could see that in the streets of Germany, the youth was what doing that the persons were carrying cards around their necks, and on that card what was written, that willing to do any work. So they were asking for jobs by placing a card on their neck, and all the person who were unemployed, what they did was that either they sat on a corner or they played cards with their friends or any other person. So that you could say that there was a great depression. The years between 1929 to 1934 were kind of a great depression, the great depression of economic crisis, because the businesses felt, you know that the US business, the US economic, you know that US financial financial status fell by half, and the Germany's businesses, or you could say industrial areas, industries were fell by 40% to the 1928 level in 1934. So you could say that 40% level fell by. So you could say that was a very bad situation. So those years were kind of years of depression for the whole world, because there was economic crisis in Germany, and many people, you could say that, who could not get any jobs because the jobs were disappearing. They had now become criminals. They were now doing criminal activities, and because of that, you know that many people's future were ruined because of that, and many people who didn't get any job, many businesses fell, and workers, you know that workers, middle class families were now fearing of proletarianization. Proletarianization means that to reduce their ranks, they were now fearing of unemployment who were businessmen, and very big businesses in Germany now fearing for their own reduced work. Now they were fearing for their own crisis, because they thought that their business could also fall by. So that was in, and many women who could not fill their children's stomach, you know that because there were crisis, there was economic crisis, so it's obvious that the price of the goods will rise high, and because of that women could not buy them, and that's why they could not fill their children's stomach, and there was a great despair. They were fell in despair. You could see that during that time, you could see that in the streets there was a great despair. There was sadness among people. There was fear among people about the economic crisis, because it was obvious all the business, all the industries were falling down. So it's obvious that there would be a great disturbance among the society of Germany. So those years were of depression. So those were the years of Great Depression, of economic crisis. Now in Germany, what was happening that all the people were blaming Weimar Republic. Weimar Republic politically was also too fragile to to control over the whole Germany, because they themselves have many inherent defects in their constitution. Like one was proportional, you know that proportional rule. That means that this made achieving the majority by any one party, you could say that almost impossible. That is, it made the rule by the coalitions. Coalitions means that they, not just one party, 2 or 3 parties are joined together, have made their hands together, and now they are working together for their majority in the parliament. So that is coalition. That you could say that the proportional rule it was in the constitution of Weimar Republic, and there was also Article 48 of that constitution that gave power to president to suspend all civic rights, to declare emergency in the country, and to do anything. It gave all the power to the president to do all these things. And you know that in the short term of the Weimar Republic, there were 20 cabinets that were changed one by one, and on an average they were lasted for 239 days. So you could say that in the 20 cabinets that were changed in the Weimar Republic, on an average of 239 days, that lasted for 239 days on an average. So you could say that Weimar Republic, that was too fragile, that was too powerless to control over Germany, and now people were also losing their hopes for the democratic parliamentary system, because it could not solve any problems. And now Weimar Republic had vulnerability. Their constitution had vulnerability of dictatorship in the country. So that was the story of the Great Depression, years of economic crisis. So our next topic is Hitler's rise to power. Hitler's rise to power. You know that this all economic crisis, social crisis and political crisis formed a background for the rising power of Hitler. It all caused the rise of Hitler. Now let's discuss something about Hitler. Now Hitler was born in 1889 in Austria, and he had spent his youth in poverty. And you know that when the First World War broke out, he enrolled in the army, acted as a messenger, and also he earned medals for his bravery. So you could say that from the starting he was a kind of bravery, because he had earned some medals for bravery. And after that, in 1919, he joined a small organization, a small party, that was German Workers' Party. And after that, subsequently, he took over the organization and renamed it as National Socialist German Workers' Party, and this party came to be known as Nazi Party. Now Nazi Party, I have discussed, I have explained. You know that Nazism, that was done by Nazi Party. The ideology, the structure of Nazi Party is known as Nazism. So now he had taken the organization and had renamed as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, also called as Nazi Party. Now what he was planning to observe power. He was now planning to reach the power. He was now planning to be powerful, because he had ambition. Because the First World War, defeat at First World War, he was very angry, and because of the Versailles Treaty, it made him more and more furious. So that's why he wanted power, and that's why in 1923 he made a plan to capture Bavaria, region of Germany, and then march to the Berlin and took over the power. But he failed and was arrested for his treason. He was tried for treason and later he was released. So you could say that he was reaching to the power, but he could not, because it was very difficult for the Nazi Party to mobilize all the people, to make them united, to mobilize all the people. But slowly and slowly, gradually and slowly, Hitler rose to power. And how? Let's see. Now Hitler was a passion speaker. He was a passionate speaker. His words moved to the people's heart, because at the time of Great Depression, it gave a hold for Hitler to move on. Because of the Great Depression, the years of depression, Great Depression of economic crisis, made a hold for the Hitler to move on. And between those years, what he did was that, as you know that during that time, businesses were shut down, banks collapsed, and all the industries, businesses were now shut down, had collapsed. Now he was giving his speeches to the people, promising that he would employ all the people. There would be employment for the people who are working, who are searching for the work, and he would weed out all the foreign conspiracies from the Germany. Now he was a passionate speaker, as you know that his words were so strong that moved all the people of Germany, and that was the reason. Because of the people's support, he was risen in power. He had risen in power, because you know that everyone has his own style of giving speech, of speaking, like my style, and that's why Hitler's style was also kind of very strong to move the people's mind, and that's how he mobilized all the people together. And he had also some kind of new, unique taste of politics. Now he had seen that the rituals and speculators were very important for the speeches, and you know that the red banners with swastika sign, the Nazi salute, and the round of applause after the speech were the signs of the Nazi speech, of the Adolf Hitler's speech, because they were kind of, as I've said, that he believed in spectacles and in rituals that were very important to mobilize all the people, and that's how he united all the people in support support of him. So that's it. He rose into the power. Now Hitler's propaganda, the Nazi propaganda, instilled a hope for the people for a better future, and that's why people were choosing him. You could see that in 1928, when the Nazi party was fighting for the election, it got only 2.7%, but in 1932 it got 37% votes with the majority. Know that it was the largest party with the 37%. So you could see that because of Hitler's speech, his speaking style, his passion, his power, he had risen into the power, and now he was getting majority in the parliament. Now our subtopic is the destruction of democracy. The destruction of democracy. Now on 30th January 1933, President Hindenburg, who was the president of Germany, gave the post of chancellorship to Hitler. Now chancellorship, which was the highest rank of the cabinet ministers of the cabinet of Germany. Now he had got that post, you know, that the highest rank in the cabinet ministers, in the cabinet ministry. And after that he was acquiring, he wanted more and more power, because he now had lost faith in the democratic. Even the starting, he didn't like the democratic rules, the Weimar Constitution. He didn't like the ideas, the ideas of democratic parliamentary system. And he was helped, you could say that, a mysterious fire that broke out in the Reichstag, that is a German parliament. That was the German parliament. A mysterious fire that broke out on the 28th February 1933 gave him a chance. Now after that fire, all the power was given to Hitler. You could say that all the rights, like right to expression, right to speech, right to press, were now taken away, were now suspended from all the citizens, from all the people of Germany. And now Hitler had acquired power because he had the support of many conservatives, as we had already discussed in the previous chapter. So he had got the support, he had got the power of conservatives. And now on 3rd March 1933, he passed an enabling act. And after that act, because of that act, there was a setup of dictatorship. That act set up a dictatorship in the Germany, because it gave all the power to Hitler, and now Hitler had the power to rule by decree. So you could rule by decree means that whatever he says, that should be done in the country. So he had the power to rule by the decree, and now the dictatorship was set up in Germany. And after that, what happened, that he was turning back on the communists, because he didn't like communists from the starting. And now many communists were packed off to the concentration camps. Now concentration camps were like camps that were for the people who were now being killed. You know that before killing people, Hitler packed them at the concentration camps. Packed them means that there was a little space, but too many people for that little space. So before dying, before killing them, he had packed them there, and from there he would take to gas chambers, and there he would kill them. So that were concentration camps. He had many concentration camps, like in Auschwitz as well, in many parts. And after that, that many communists were now being hurled to the concentration camp. As for example, from a small village that was of half of a population, 500,000 of population, and there were 6,808 people who were carried away from those areas, and out of them, you could say that more than 1,500, around 1,500 were only communists. and communists were only one kind of 52 communists, 52 kinds of victims that were persecuted by the Nazi party. So you could say that there was a destruction of democracy. Now Hitler had gained so much power, and now he was, you could say that he was at his pinnacle. He was now turning back to communist, socialist, Catholics, Democrats, and now he had already destroyed the democracy in his country, and now all the power had been given to the Hitler. Now he could do what he wanted. He had set up many agencies. You know that many police forces were set up. Apart from the normal police force that was in green uniform of the Germany, there were many other police forces that was formed, like for SS, service now, like for SD, the Gestapo was a secret police, that secret police officers. Now there were SD, SS, SS stormtroopers. So there were other many police agencies that were being set up to work for the Hitler. They were loyal only to Hitler. Now whatever Nazis wanted had to be done in the country, and to implement all those things to be done, to take, as for example, if they had to arrest members, now those newly formed forces were now helping Nazi party. So you could say that whatever had to be done in the country had to be implemented by the SS, SD, Gestapo. Gestapo, you could say that was the most powerful among them. So that is the destruction of democracy. Now all the democracy in the Germany was destroyed, was destructed by Hitler, Adolf Hitler, and after that he got power, what he had wanted from starting. And now he was thinking of conquering parts of Europe because he had ambition of turning Germany into a mighty power. So now our next subtopic is Reconstruction. So Reconstruction, now that Hitler had acquired power, now he had assigned Hjalmar Schacht, who was an economist during that time, very big economist. He had assigned him all the economic to regain financial status, the economy of Germany. And soon what happened that the most famous superhighways of Germany and the people's car, it produced the people's car, Volkswagen. So that was, that after acquiring power, Hitler gained success too much. That in his ambition, in his view, in his mind of view, he gained success too early. As for example, in 1933 he had broken all his relations from the League of Nations, and in 1938 he had joined Germany and Austria under the slogan "One people, one empire and one leader." So that was slogan, and under this slogan he had joined Germany and Austria. So you could say that he was acquiring power too early. And after that he went to the West German Sudetenland, and after that he went to the West Germany, that is Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, and he gained power there too. He took that part too, and soon after he regained the Rhineland that was taken from Germany by the French. So he also regained that region of Germany. So you could say that he was reconstructing things in Germany too early, you could say that too soon, too quickly for his from his wide of view. So after that what happened was that, but in all these things he had a secret support from the England too, because England thought that this verdict, that Versailles verdict was too harsh for Germany. As you know that England thought that it was too disgraceful for the Germany, and it wasn't right to do that, and that's why it supported Hitler. England supported Hitler during that time, and now Germany had extended its region. And after that, now Hitler's point of view was that he wanted only war among countries, and then he would take the resources, the land of that country to extend his mother country. And now he was focusing of his economy, of his financial status of the country on the rearmament. on the rim, you know that in the First World War all the military of Germany were demilitarized, and now he was paying money, he was focusing on the rearmament. An economist that I have talked about, that is Halmerstadt, wasn't opposed of that, and the cautious people, however, had no place in the Nazi Germany, and that's why Schad had to leave Nazi Germany and had to fly away from that country. So in 1939, now Nazi Germany, Hitler had invaded the Poland, and that made disturbance against France and Britain. And in 1940, a three-party act was signed up between Germany, Italy and Japan. Now these three countries were now supporting each other to invade their enemies, to invade other countries, and to make Hitler a superpower, Germany a superpower. And you know that what happened after that? Now Germany had regained power. Hitler had gained power so much, and now he was conquering areas. Now he made a war against Russia. Now Russia, you know that, had inflicted a very devastating defeat, and they retreating the German soldiers to the heart of Germany, that is Berlin. And after that, a Soviet hegemony was formed, you could say that. And after that, Japan had also got power after that, and now it was also planning to control other countries. You know that Japan was now planning to attack the naval bases of US. But what was happening in the US was that the US now wanted to stay away from the Second World War, because the Second World War that had started from the 1939 when Hitler had invaded Poland. Now US wanted to stay away from the Second World War because it was worse. You could say that it was already hit by the economic crisis because of the First World War, and that's why it didn't want any kind of next crisis in its country. That's why US didn't want to fight that Second World War, but the situations made it to fight back, because what Japan did was that, you know that in 1940 Hitler was at the pinnacle of his power, and that's why Japan also got support and attacked the Pearl Harbor base of US, and you could say that, and then that was the entry of US in 1945 that ended the Second World War, that made the Hitler suicide himself with his own family. And you know that there was most important fact, when US did entry in the Second World War, first it was against Japan. You could say that it placed an atom bomb in the Hiroshima region of Japan. It threw off an atom bomb in the Hiroshima region of Japan, because it was Japan that started it. If Japan had not bombed, had not attacked the Pearl Harbor base of US, then I think US would not have intervened in the Second World War. So you could say that in First World War as well as in Second World War, because of the US entry, the war ended. Otherwise it could have stayed longer. Like as we had seen in the First World War II, the situation was different, and in the Second World War II, the situation was different. And you know what, that when Hitler died, when Hitler committed suicide, there were many newspapers that were, being printed the conditions under Germany, what was happening under Germany under the shadow of the Second World War, that we will discuss. Now we have seen about the Second World War. Now when Hitler was at his pinnacle of power, was at his pinnacle of the power, now what was he doing? Let's see the Nazi worldview. What was the worldview of Nazi Germany? We will see about Nazism. We have seen the rise of Hitler and its end as well. Now let's see the Nazism. What was Nazism? What was Nazism criminalities? Let's discuss. So now our next topic is the Nazi worldview. The Nazi worldview. Now that we have seen that the Second World War had ended, and now we have to see during that time, under the shadow of the Second World War, what was happening in Nazi Germany. What was the worldview of Nazism? You know that of Hitler. Let's see. Now Nazism had established a racial hierarchy in the society of Germany. Now those were considered desirables who were blonde, blue-eyed, or the Nordic Aryan Germans, Nordic German Aryans. And you know that Aryans were at the top rung. Aryans were at the top rank. You were considered as the topmost in the society, and the Jews, whereas Jews were considered the lowest rung in the society. So you could say that according to the physical abilities of people, they were arranged in order of ranks in the society. Hierarchy, there was a racial hierarchy among them. Those who were very black livings, you know that those who were black or unfit, were disabled, were handicapped, you could say that, were considered undesirable. So you could say that there was establishment of racial hierarchy in the German society through the worldview of Nazism, of Hitler. And now those things were based, Hitler's idea of racial hierarchy was based on the ideas of Charles Darwin and Herbert Spencer. Now Charles Darwin, who was a thinker, great thinker, made his philosophy, wanted to show that creation of nature, creation of animals and people through evolution. And Herbert Spencer added his own ideas to his point of thinking. Now he wanted to show that only those people who could adapt themselves in the climatic change could live the longest life on the earth. Now here you have to remember that we should know that, we should bear in mind that those ideas were natural ideas. They weren't meant to hurt people or to make a massacre, to make you could say that a very brutal thing in the world. But Hitler's ideologies, you could say that from those ideologies he made his own ideology of racial hierarchy, and that's why a racial hierarchy was established in Germany. Now that was the point of physically how much a person was able to do that. Now there was geopolitical thinkers as well, geopolitical things in Germany in the worldview of Nazism as well. That was to extend the land. Now Hitler's main point of view was that he had to invade as many countries as he could. Now he wanted to invade many countries. Almost he wanted to conquer all Europe. He wanted to make Germany, he wanted to turn Germany into a mighty power, and he wanted to extend his motherland. He thought that to settle up to the new settlers had to settle up in a few lands, in a very big lands, and that's why we also have to extend the motherland of Germany. That was his point of view, and that's why he was invading as many regions of countries as much as he could, and many people were now being settled up in those areas. So you could say that in the society of Germany there was racial hierarchy, and in the Hitler what he wanted was that we have to invade. You could say that his main thinking was war, to make war, to fight war against countries, to invade those countries. That was a Nazi worldview. Now our subtopic is about establishment of the racial state. Establishment of the racial state. Now you have seen that there was establishment of racial hierarchy in the society of Germany. Now there was a racial state. Germany had become a racial state under the you could say that leadership of Hitler. Now you know that Aryans were at the top. They had to maintain their purity, and they were made to dominate the world. That was the Hitler's thinking, and that's why all other persons, all other unfit, even the German citizens as well, who were, you could say that, physically disabled, were considered undesirables. And at first you could say that they were segregated, they had to live alone, they had to live in different parts, and slowly and gradually they were now being killed, because Hitler's thinking was like that. He wanted to eliminate all those who were considered as undesirables. And you know that in a euthanasia program, it was a kind of program to kill people who were undesirables, who were physically disabled. It didn't matter whether they were Germans or they were Poles or they were Russian. Even the Russian, Poles, you know that people from Russia, Poland were also killed by the Hitler's program. So that was his thinking. There was an establishment of racial state. Now you know that all the Russian, Poles and the black livings in Germany had no right to live among them as equal. You know that there was no equality among them, and that's why they had to live as slave. And because they were slave, they were starving. There was so much, their situation, conditions were so worse, and they were starving, and that's why slowly, gradually they were killed. They died of starving, because if he was slave, he had to do so much work, because they were considered undesirables, as well as he wasn't given food. Those persons weren't given food, and that's why, because of high work and with starvation, they died by themselves. And there was a very much hatred of Hitler towards Jews. Now he considered Jews as the main enemy of the German society, because during that time you have to see that when there was economic crisis in Germany, Jews were businessmen, were money lenders, and that's why Hitler thought of them. Hitler called them as the killers of Christ, and they were called as usurers that were debting, that were creditors, that were lending money to the people with so much interest, and they were, you could say that when there was economic crisis in Germany, now Jews were very rich and they were helping other people. Now Hitler was saying that it was because of Jews that there was economic crisis in Germany. So you could say that Hitler had his own personal hatred towards Jews, and that's why he was taking off his all anger on Jews. It wasn't that only Jews were affected, there were many other groups as well, like Gypsies were also the worst groups that suffered due to Hitler, due to Nazi worldwide, you know, the Nazism, due to racial state. Now they were also killed. Gypsies were also killed. There were many Gypsies who were killed. Now Gypsies were a kind of community of people, like Roma and Sinti were also one of them. Now we were talking about Jews. Now Jews were moneylenders and were businessmen, but now their situation was also warning. They were now living in ghetto. Ghetto is a place where the member of the same community, people from the same community, like from Muslim, from Hindu, like from a same community, group or religion, live there. That is, they have been neglected from the society, and that's why they have to live in ghetto. That they have to do ghettoization. That's why Jews were now living in ghetto. Their all lands were now banned. You could say that their lands were banned and were controlled by Hitler, were taken away by Hitler. Their money was taken away by Hitler, and Jews had first to live in ghetto. Now they were taken to concentration camps, and finally in the gas chambers. Now gas chambers was a place to kill people. You know that they were big chambers where people were taken away, where people were packed away, you could say, and suddenly a poisonous gas would leak from the holes. You know that a poisonous gas would be leaked towards in that chamber, and because of that gas, poisonous gas, people would die in that chamber. So that was gas chambers, an unprecedented means of killing people that was devised by Hitler. So now that we were talking about Jews, so you know that Jews first had to live in ghetto. You know that in the period of, you could say that from the 1929 to 1934, 1935, they had to stay away from the society. But after that, around the Second World War, from 1939 to 1945, there was mass killing of Jews. There were around 6 million Jews who were killed, and that's why the population of Jews had fallen by half because of that mass killing and unprecedented mass killings of Jews. So that was establishment of the racial state in Germany by Hitler. Now you know that Hitler had also spoken in many of his speech about Jews, where he had taken off his hatred against, against the Jews. So we have seen that there were many groups like Gypsies, Jews, Black livings in Germans, and they were all physically disabled or from their own hatred. They were all killed in the last. First they had to live away from them, and then they were killed. There were many programs that were made just to kill them. So that was you could say that Nazi worldwide, how brutal it was in the gas chamber. You know that was very brutal thing to do. So next subtopic is the racial utopia. The racial utopia. So you know that under the shadow of the World War II, Second World War, there was, that genocide and war became the sides of a same coin, two sides of a same coin. At the same time, the war was being continued, and at the same time, there was genocidal, a mass killing of people of different communities by the Nazi party, by Hitler, you could say that. So you could say that under the shadow of the Second World War, the Nazi party proceed to realize their murderous actions under the shadow of the Second World War. And you know that when the Poland was annexed by the Germany, the northwest part of Poland was annexed to Germany, and all the Poles were forced to leave their homes and properties behind, and then they were herded like cattle, and then they were transferred to the second part of that country that was called as general government. And there you could say that it was called as a destination of undesirables, because all the people who were physically or mentally unfit, were disabled, were considered as undesirables by the Nazi Germany, and the general government was known as the destination of those undesirables. That means their end of life, because it's just obvious. And you know that all the Polish children who looked like Aryans were taken away, were snatched away, were forcibly snatched away from their mothers, and then they were examined by the race experts, and if they passed the test, they were raised by the German families, German Aryan families, and if they didn't, they were sent to the orphanages, and later they would perish, because that was a simple Nazi argument. The stronger ones would be cherished, the stronger ones would dominate the world, and the undesirables would be perished. That was a Nazi argument, the Nazi nature, that was it. So that you could say that the racial utopia, that was racial utopia. And you know that there were many gas chambers in many regions, and in that part, in the general government, with a large ghettoization and with large gas chambers, with many gas chambers, Jews were also killed there. So you have to remember that in that part of Poland, Poles were killed as well as Jews were also killed. So that's, we have discussed the racial utopia. Now there were steps to death. Let's discuss about the steps to death that is given specifically in your book. Now there was stage 1, that is exclusion from the mainstream society. That is, Hitler declared you have no right to live among us as citizens. Now they were living in the society, but not as citizens, but as low-term people. Now they, according to the Nuremberg Constitution, that Nuremberg laws that was declared, that was introduced by Hitler in 1935, there were rules against those people who were considered undesirables, that were that were Jews, the relations, the marriage between Jews and Aryans were forbidden, and extramarital relation between Jews and any Aryan or desirable person was a crime during that time, and Jews were not allowed to fly the national flag of Germany, and there was a rule to boycott the Jewish business and to boycott them as well, and they didn't have their right. You know that there were many rules that were made, that were introduced against Jews, like as I've said, that they didn't have even the freedom to fly their own country's national flag. So that was it. And now it was a time period between the 1933 to 1939, that between that period of time, you could say that it was a kind of exclusion from the mainstream society. And during that time, there was one more thing that was being done, that was the synagogue, the worship places of Jews were also burnt down, and their houses, worship places, their all properties were burnt down by the desirables or Aryans of the German society. And later on there was stage 2, that was ghettoization that lasted for the time period of 1939 to 1944. And during that time, all Jews, you know that during that time, during this period of time, all Jews had to carry a star, a David star on their breasts. So that would be the identity of the Jews. You could say that the star they had to carry, and because of that star they were identified as Jews, and after that they were sent to the ghettos. They had to live far away from the mainstream society in the ghettos, and before entering those ghettos they had to leave all their properties behind, all their money, properties, treasure, they all things that were valuables, they had to leave them behind before entering the ghetto. And in the ghetto as well, the situations were worse. You could say that because the hygiene, there was poor hygiene conditions, there was not that much food that was supplied to that area, and people were now starving. They had become very poor. You know that without money, without any facilities in that ghettos, how would they survive on? So many people began to die because of that, because of many diseases, because of many things. And the stage 3 was that elimination, annihilation or animal elimination, because Hitler said that the problem of Jews, it had no solution. It was a no solution problem, and that's why Hitler had to eliminate them all. That was the only solution for him. So that was once he said in his speech. And 1941 onwards, what he was doing, that all Jews were now being killed. First they were taken away, they were being kept under the concentration camps, and by the cars, car, they were taken to the gas chambers, and there they were killed because they had no right to live. First, you have no right to live among us as citizens. Next, you have no right to live among us, and next you have no right to live. So that were three steps, stage 3. You know that steps to death. And now gas chambers. As I've talked about gas chambers, there were many reasons where gas chambers were, like Auschwitz, Belzec, and Sobibor. There were many reasons where these gas chambers were, and now people were taken, not just like very good, they were herded like cattle to those gas chambers. So you could say that these were steps to death. Under the Nazism worldview, there were the situations that were not that much good. There was no equality among people, and you could say that Jews were at the worst, you could say, the lowest rung during that time. So those were the death steps to death, stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. Now our next topic is youth in Nazi Germany. Youth in Nazi Germany. So you know that, as you know that in Nazi Germany, Hitler said that the youth was very important. As you know that in any country, in any nation, what is the most important is about the youth of that country, about the children of that country, how much they powerful are, how much they you could say that how much they produce the country, they protect the country, that depends on the youth of that country. So Hitler's thought was also the same. He thought that the Nazi Germany could only be established when the youth of Nazi Germany is very powerful, is empowered, you could say that is aggressive, is loyal to Hitler. So that was his thought. Now you might be thinking that how were the schools of Nazi Germany? In Nazi Germany, well, in Nazi Germany the schools were firstly cleansed. Cleansed means that all teachers who were Jews or Gypsies or who were undesirables or political opponents were dismissed from the schools. So you could say that all the teachers from the schools were undesirables in the views of Nazi Germany, and all the political opponents who were not considered, who didn't seem to be politically supportive to the Nazism were now dismissed from the schools. And children too. Firstly, children were segregated. That means Jews and Germans could not sit together. Now Jews had to sit at the corner of the door or outside outside the room, and there was much more work that they had to do in the school. So the study was less, but the work for Jews was more than that. And subsequently, all the Jews or Gypsies, all the undesirables were, you could say that, were taken away from the school, were suspended from the schools, and subsequently you could say that they were taken to the gas chambers, their ending. So you could say that in the schools only the Nazi children, only the German children, only the Aryans were prolonged. They had a prolonged period of their education. Now for education, all the textbooks were rewritten about the racial science, and that stereotypes about the Jews were also also spread among those children, among those desirable children, or you could say Nazi children, even in the maths class. So you could say that rumors, stereotypes against Jews, about Jews, Gypsies, all those undesirables were spread in every mode it could be possible. And also the games that were selected to be played in school were also like that, from which all the boys could be more aggressive and more violative. That is, Hitler thought that the boxing was the best game for the children to play, to be more, more powerful, more steel-hearted, more cold-hearted, you could say that, iron-hearted. So that was the education, primary education for the students, for the kids that were desirable, that were considered as desirables under the worldview of Nazism. Now their education, you could say that how were they educated, how were they raised in Nazi Germany? Let's discuss. So first, when they were 10-year-old boys were sent to the Jungvolk. Jungvolk was a place that was for the children under the 14 years of age, and only boys were sent. You have to remember, only the boys, because girls were different, that we will discuss later in this chapter. So the boys were sent to the Jungvolks, and it was a kind of an organization for those children. There they had their primary education, and after that, when they are 14 years old, they would go to the Hitler Youth. That was earlier named as a youth organization, Nazism youth organization. It was formed in 1922, but later it was renamed as the Hitler Youth. Now there they would go, and what they would learn is that to be more aggressive, to be loyal to Hitler, to be against Jews, to not to maintain any kind of relationship with Jews, Gypsies, and all those who were considered undesirables, and they were meant to be more iron-hearted, more strong, violative, you could say. And after that, at the age of 18 years, they would go to the labor services, and after they would join the armed forces. They would join those services to serve the country, to serve the Nazi Germany. That was the purpose of their life. So that was it. And even that even when a child was born, even when he was 3 or 4 years old, he was given a flag of Nazi Germany to hold, to wave among him. So that, you could say, was his early education, and his education, those students, kids' education, was a very extended process. You could say that a very big process. So you could say that that was the situation of youth in the Nazi Germany. All those who were undesirable didn't have any space in any school or in any educational services, any educational, you could say, any educational universities. They were taken off, subsequently were taken to the gas chambers. But those who were considered desirables had so much facilities for their education, for their empowerment, you could say, for their knowledge. That was the situation of youth in the Nazi Germany. Now our subtopic is about the Nazi cult of motherhood. The Nazi cult of motherhood. So you know that while we have discussed about the boys had to serve the army in the Nazi Germany, they had to do services, they had to be loyal to Hitler. But what about the girls? But what about the females? Now, as the boys were taught to be steel-hearted, to be strong, to be aggressive, to be powerful. Now, girls were taught to be, you know, that kind-hearted. They were taught to rear a pure-blood Aryan. You know that they had to rear a pure-blood Aryan, and they had to teach their children about the Nazi values. So you could say that in the schools, what was taught to the children, to the kids, to the students was that the men and women were radically different from each other, and all the struggles that had of women to right to vote, to be equal to the man that had been in the discussion during those days were just nothing. That was taught, that was to be taught in the school in Nazi Germany. So you could say that there was difference between men and women. But as you know that once Hitler said that in my state, my mother is the most important citizen. Now there was difference between mothers as well. Those mothers, those females who gave birth to the pure Aryans were awarded, they were given reward. But those females or those mothers who gave birth to the undesirable children, like for unfit, physically or mentally unfit, they were punished. You know that there was severe punishments for them. So you could say that there was difference between mothers as well. They were not treated equally among them. Now those who reared a pure blood Aryan, they were given concessions in the shops and in the theaters, cinemas, and everywhere, and also they were given very good facilities in hospitals, while those who didn't rear the pure blood Aryans weren't given anything, and instead they were punished severely. And you know that females weren't allowed to maintain any relationship with the undesirables, with Jews, Gypsies, and if any woman was found to have any kind of relationship with Jews or Gypsies or any kind of undesirable, there was punishment. That was that they would be marched to the streets of Germany with shaven head and blackened face and placards around their neck and in which it was written, "I have sullied the honor of Nazi Germany and I must be punished." So that was the situation of women, the cult of motherhood in Nazi Germany. And that was not end of the punishment for those women. Their whole family, and if they had husband, their husband were also hauled for a severe punishment, like for in jail, and their all civic rights were taken away, were suspended. And there was also a thing that Hitler wanted to encourage women, encourage mother to give more and more births to the Aryans, pure blood Aryans, and that's why he declared crosses badge, the crosses rewards for women. Now a bronze cross was given if a female had given birth to 4 children. For 6 children it was silver bronze, silver cross, and for 8 or more it was gold bronze, you could say gold crosses that were given to those females as a reward to them. But those who didn't rear any kind of blood, any kind of Aryan were imprisoned for their life and also was taken to the gas chambers. So that was a kind of situation of mothers in the Nazi Germany. You could say that there was difference between men and women, and even in women there was difference because the tasks were different. You know that there was a huge kind of difference among mothers. So that's the cult of motherhood in the Nazi Germany. So our next subtopic is the art of propaganda. The art of propaganda. So the Nazi regime, the Nazism, Hitler used the media with a great care to make a great effort, because you know that we often, the government, anybody who is ruling over a country has to use media, has to use language with a great care. That's why also the Nazi regime used the language and media with a great care to make a very great effort. You know that many radios, podcasts, newspapers, magazines, leaflets and many slogans were spread throughout the worldwide to spread the ideas of Nazism. Now in those posters, if there is any poster, what would be there? That all the socialists, Democrats, Catholics, communists, Jews, all those who are undesirables would be shown as would be mocked, would be abused, would be shown in a very funny way, and would be shown as a degenerated, as a very powerless, as very, you could say that, who has nothing to do, you could say that. So you could say that through the posters, there were many posters and there were many films as well based on Jews, to abuse Jews, to insult Jews, and the most infamous one was the Eternal Jew. The Eternal Jew was, you could say that, was a film based on Jews, to mock Jews, to abuse Jews and to insult them, and it was the most infamous film that was produced during that time. Till now it's the most infamous one, you could say that. And there was many things, they were spread worldwide to spread their views, to spread the ideas of Nazism. Like many posters were formed, many posters were shown throughout the world, and what was in those pictures, that many different paintings were there, many different slogans were there. Like for example, there was a painting where there was a bundle of money, you could say that, a bag in which there was so much money, and a funny drawing of a Jew was drawn on it, who was sitting over it, and it was shown that a Jew earned so much money that he could not come down above his money. So that was the meaning of those paintings. So you could say that there was an art of propaganda. Many posters were built. Now Jews were oftenly shown as a very funny thing, or very powerless, who weren't that much powerful, and as well as goes for the socialists, Catholics, Democrats, who are the enemy of Hitler. So that was the art of propaganda, because Hitler used media with great care. He always, you know that he was a passionate speaker. He always delivered his speech in a very passionate way, and that's why people liked him, people supported him, and there were many people till now who were supporting him in the media as well. So that's the art of the propaganda. Now our next topic is ordinary people and the crime against humanity. Ordinary people and the crime against humanity. So if I ask you that if there is, you know that Hitler was spreading his views through posters and was asking for support through the worldwide. Now if I ask you, in the Germany, all the people same? What was the connection between this normal person and the crime against humanity, the ideas of Nazism? You know that many people liked him. Many German people liked him, liked Nazism ideas. They were kind of a Nazi thought. They had the thoughts of Nazism, and they thought that in that way there would be a reform in the German society. There would be prosperity, happiness in the German society. You could say that many people were now suspecting their neighbors, were now reporting to the Nazi parties, you know, that to the police officers or any department for their suspicious neighbors or any friend or any person who is going through the street and looks like a Jew. So that was it. many people were now had become Nazi, but not all the people were Nazi. You could say that all people weren't like Nazism, weren't like Nazi party, because many people were resistance fighter. Many people, as for example, Pastor Nuremberg, Pastor, who was you could say a very resistance fighter. He was very brave to support Jews in that situation, to support all those who were kind of undesirables. And there is also a movie that is Schindler's List. Schindler, who is still taken, who is still being worshipped in Israel. Israel is a country of Jews, as you know that it was formed after it. So in Israel, he is still worshipped by the people, by the Jews, because Schindler protected many people, many Jews in his own, you could say that in his own hand, on his own hand. So that was it. Many people were there who were supporting Jews, who were against Nazism. But there were many people in German society who were neither supporting Nazism or now were against it, because they were too afraid, because they were too scared to act, to defeat or to resist against Nazism. So that was it. Many people were supporting Nazism, but the majority was doing nothing. And there was a person who wrote down a slogan that when they came for first they came for communism. Well, I was not communist, so I said nothing. Then they come for socialist democrats. Well, I wasn't him. I was not socialist democrat, so I did nothing. And then they came for the Jews. Well, I was not Jews, but I did a little. But when they came for me, nothing would stand up for me. So that's it. First, you have to resist against any wrongdoing, because if you don't do it, when the situations come to you, trouble comes to you, nobody would help you too. So that's it. Now you have to remember, there aren't always people who supported Nazism. Many were against him. Now there is a story of Jews, that is Charlotte Brandt, who wrote everything. She was in concentration camps and she wrote everything that she had seen in her diary, and later on she publicized it on a very large theater, and it on a very big screen. So there are also very many movies that you could see that are based on Jews' lives, because Jews were the most suffered, were the most killed during that time. As I've said that Hitler was a big hater of Jews, because Jews were very big businessmen. They had earned so much money with their own hard work. So Hitler thought that they were earning money, they were taking all the money. So Jews were the people who suffered the most. And there are many films, movies that are based on this situation, Second World War, like Schindler's List, like Life is Beautiful, and there is Anne Frank's Diary. There are many. So you could watch them. Now, as I said that ordinary people and the crimes against humanity. So I have said that all people weren't Nazism, weren't a kind of Nazi, and all weren't a resistance fighter, because majority, as you know that if there is any wrongdoing of the government, many people don't do anything. That's it. Now the next and last subtopic of this chapter is knowledge about the Holocaust. Knowledge about the Holocaust. Knowledge about the Holocaust. So what is Holocaust? Holocaust is, you could say that Nazism killing, mass killing that were done by Nazism, Nazi party under the shadow of the World War, because it was a genocidal war. Many people, mass killings were there. 6 million Jews, 1 million Polish civilians, 70,000 Germans who were disabled, and there are many more, like 200,000 gypsies. That was too many to be killed, and that's also in a very brutal way, in gas chambers where the live people were killed just in a second. So that was very brutal. So you could say that you have to take the knowledge for the knowledge of the Holocaust. As you know that there were many people in the concentration camps who kept many memories of their sufferings, because Jews wanted to spread their sufferings worldwide. They wanted that every person in the future should remember our sufferings, our tribute, our killings, you could say that. And many people kept writing their diary, made archives, and there were many hidden points. As for example, in 3 cans of milk, you know that milk cans that are very big, many letters, many diaries, you could say that many letters that were describing their situations, many pages, many diaries, archives, memoirs were written, and those were hidden underground, and then later on in 1950 it was found by the military officers, you know that. So it was found, and then because when there was Second World War, before Second World War and during the time of Second World War, what there was that worldwide it wasn't known that the Jews were suffering that much. That was unprecedented, that was unbelievable by any person. But when the Second World War ended and the US army came into the Germany, they saw what had happened. They found many evidences that were showing that the Nazism ideologies, what Nazism ideologies were, there was a kind of desirables and undesirables. And you know what, that when the Second World War was about to end up, when Hitler saw his defeat, what he did was that he spread petrol all over his buildings so that all evidences against him would be cut off, would be erased. And he was a kind of person who very careful, like I have said, that the art of propaganda. He had never used any word like kill or murder in his you could say that official communicating. Now there were terms used for it, like for special treatment. When they had to do mass killings, in gas chambers, they would say special treatment or the final solution for the Jews. They would say euthanasia for the disabled, and later on this infection and many more. And evacuation term was used when the people were deported to the gas chambers. And guess what? Gas chambers were called as disinfection areas. Disinfection areas that were called for the gas chambers. So you could say that Hitler was a kind of a cunning person, and when he saw his defeat, he burnt down all the evidences, and later on he committed suicide with all his members, with his prime minister, with his family in Berlin bunker. So that's it. We have discussed knowledge of the Holocaust. That is very important. Still there are many films, many accents, there are many plays, fictions that have been made to pay a tribute to who had suffered, who had died, and embarrassment for those who had done it, who had collated, and a warning for those who remained silent, because remaining silent is also like giving a support to those who are doing wrong. So you have to urge your voice. As I said, that there are many films that you can watch that are based on Jews' situation. So that's it for the chapter. We have discussed about the Nazism and the rise of Hitler. Now there are, you could say that in an arranging order, there are events and dates that you should remember. First, what was there? From 1914 the First World War began, and 1917 US entry. US joined the Allies force, and in 1918 there was you could say that 1918 First World War ended, and in 1919 the Versailles Treaty, the Treaty of Versailles was signed, and after that in 1923 it was a good time for Great Depression, and after that in 1933 Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, and after that he had risen power. There was dictatorship in that country, and in 1939 it was that Second World War started, and in 1939 US joined, and in 1941 US joined the Second World War. In 1945 the Second World War ended with the end of Hitler, with the defeat of Hitler. Now there are many more dates that we had discussed in this chapter that I can't remember, that you should remember. So that's it for today. That is for this chapter. Now we have discussed about the Nazism and the rise of Hitler. We had seen what Nazism was. Now Nazism, after studying all this chapter, what we have understood is that Nazism was not just a party or just masculine. They were the ideology, the structure of ideas to govern a country. That was a very huge structure that is still remembered among the people. And we have also seen the rise rise of Hitler who is still remembered, and there you could say that he rose in power. He was supported by England, and that's why he rose in the power, and later on he turned against England. That's why we should never correlate with the bad people, you know that. So that's it in this chapter. That's it in the Nazism and the rise of Hitler. I have discussed all topics and subtopics, and the next chapters of this book will be covered in the further videos. So thank you very much.